Weird shit that happened. The FBI started following me. I was an 11-year-old. Up until I was 11, he was a hero. I asked Drummer one time if he had ever brought a case against anybody based on information he got from Richard. And he said no. Called him one day and said he'd just gotten back from Cuba, where he was sent to assassinate Fidel Castro. He would have known Jack Ruby. Yeah.
Hi, welcome back to Detective Story. I'm Mike Hammond. Thanks again for joining in. Really appreciate it. If you're enjoying what we're doing here, please do us a big favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, leave us a comment. We have a lot of listeners out there who are not subscribed to the channel, and that's cool if that's what you want, but it does help us a lot if you subscribe. That helps us build the channel and helps us put more content out there. So we really appreciate that. So today, we are going to part 2 of Richard Cain's story. We're going to start with the second part of the interview with his half-brother, Michael Cain, who has written the definitive work about Richard Cain, Tangled Web. That interview was cool, and Michael, I consider a friend now, and I admire his work and how much he put into this and how much of a personal toll it must have taken on him. Anybody writing a book of 20 years of research is enough, but when it's your half-brother who you once idolized as a child and you have to keep tearing down that image in your head as you find more and more information, but, you know, soldiering on to complete the work, really admire it. He's an incredible dude. So that interview will be first up. And then after that, Chris and I are going to tackle this and try and come to some conclusions on the incredibly mercurial life of Richard Cain and what we believe is true, what we think is probably not true, what could be true, what we may never know, and some things that we just baffled ourselves with. I think it's worth staying to the end with this because you will see that with Richard Cain, we found some incredible stuff. And with every door you think you've got closed, there's a crack of light in there where Richard Cain might have slipped through that door. So, you know, it all ends on Grand Avenue on 20 December 1973. And we'll address that too and our thoughts about that. But I think it's worth listening to, and I think you'll enjoy it. So, off we go. Segunda parte, Richard Cain. Hi, this is Mike Hammond. Welcome back to Detective Story. We really appreciate you joining us again. I'd like to take a quick moment from the show to tell you about our sponsor and friends over at Blue Knight Security Solutions. Blue Knight Security Solutions is a security investigative firm that can handle any of your needs in that regard. I use them myself when I need investigative work done for the show or old cases that I get called on. Any of my friends, family, anybody I know and care about that needs security for their work, home, business, event, I send them to Blue Knight. I trust them. I believe in them. I wouldn't be speaking up for them in that regard if I did not. So contact them at BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com, BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. Reach out for me and I'll get you to them. Thank you again. Enjoy the show.
You know, your father's relationship and yours is your private business. But if my son turns out, if I have an idea my son's playing the kind of games that Richard's playing, probably not going to have a good relationship with him either, you know. Well, but I mean, I don't mean to get into your personal family stuff, but I just wondering how you felt as you start to do this research. Personally, was it painful? Was it a lot? It's probably. I mean, I'm just curious. Yeah, there were parts of it that were painful. Nobody wants to know that their family member is living that kind of a life. But it eventually my original goal was who killed him and why. But so many, every time I got an answer to a question, it left me with more questions. Then I eventually put the personal concerns aside because I had a great story here, and I wanted to document it as well as I could. There was weird shit that happened. The FBI started following me, and actually tried to flip me as an informant. This agent from San Francisco called and asked if we could meet for a drink, and so we went to this place down in San Jose, and he knew who I was because of my freedom of information requests. So we're sitting at this table having a cocktail, and I started to get weird vibrations from him, and I said, what? You seem to be going down a different path than I am. What are you after here? He says, well, I was hoping that we could convince you to work with us. And I started to laugh. I said, you're fucking kidding me. I'm an accountant, for Christ's sake.
I grew up in Michigan.
And you guys are the FBI. If you want to know something about me, open the file cabinet. I have absolutely nothing to do with it.
It's not like outfit guys were coming to you and anxious to lay out, give you information or talk to you or anything like that.
It just cracked me up. And then when we he was a little embarrassed that I laughed so hard, but it got even worse because when we were leaving, I excused myself to go to the restroom. There was an elevator ride involved. When I came out of the restroom, he was still standing in front of the elevator, but there were two other guys with him. And he was embarrassed, he busted. I said, you bring two guys for backup to meet with a fucking accountant? Yes, pardon my language, but
She lived more patch. Isn't that where she lived?
well, it was Taylor Street, and he, he was. I wish I could find out more about what he was up to in those days, but I met a guy, Jack Clark. You know that name? Private detective.
Oh yeah, I know of the name. I don't know anything about him.
I met him. I was in Chicago for the family.
Again, that's probably from your book.
You wrote a very nice introduction to that.
Oh right, exactly. That is where I know it from. Yeah, sure.
He was a private detective and it worked for the city of Chicago, for the state of Illinois, and a serious guy, not a bogus PI. He told me that he was age-wise, he was a peer of Richard. They were and grew up in the same neighborhood, so he knew him as a child. And he said he was always a tough guy. I mean, he wasn't big. He was only 5'7", I think, and pretty thin, but a tough fighter. And that's what you did on the streets of Chicago in the 40s.
Yeah, right.
And he's the guy who, the day that I met him, I'd taken a break from the trial to go to this event where another writer was signing books and giving a talk. So I guess that was just around the block, so I decided to go to it. And Art Bielek came to me as soon as I walked in the door and said, when you finish buying the book, he said, come on over and there's somebody I want you to meet. And as he told it to me later, before I showed up, Art Bielek and Jack Clark, there was an NPR reporter there, and two other retired cops. I don't remember their names. But Jack Clark said, has anybody read this book by Richard Cain's half-brother? They'd all read it, and he said, I tell you, he said, I want to meet that guy. And the reason he said that was was because of um, the flip on the Fiegel story.
All right.
In the book, I told the official version of what happened, and then I told the real version, and Jack was just totally blown away that anybody would do that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I had to,
Right.
because the official version is still the official version, and it's time that people understood what really happened.
Like coming across with a real version of how Fiegel was killed. And I just want to comment on that. I mean, I think one of the things that in reading it and then knowing you're his half brother, I think anybody looking at that's going to kind of have the expectation that you're going to, you're going to slant towards him, or you're going to, you're going to be a little biased or make excuses for him. And I mean, that story there typifies more than anything. But in general, throughout the book, I think you just did a really, and that's why I asked you about the emotion of it, and if it's so painful, because you really, you don't shy away from any of the ugly stuff. You really told the story, it seems like, as you found it out, or what you could document.
I felt like I had to keep it straight,
Yeah.
and some of it was difficult to deal with it, and frankly, some of it never made it into the book. Yeah, it was. There were times when it was a little bit.
So you feel like, this is a weird question, but it just, how do you feel about Richard now? I mean, good guy, bad guy, your brother who went bad. I mean, do you even think about it in those terms, or?
I do. He was, to me, as an 11-year-old, up until I was 11, he was a hero. We loved seeing him, and that last time that I saw him, my brother and I spent a week in Chicago with Richard and Rosemary, the wife number 2, and the twins, who were like 2 years old at the time. So we did cool stuff, and it never occurred to me then that there was any corruption going on.
Guy that helps me co-host a lot of my shows now is my ex-brother-in-law, or a close friend. He asked me to ask you this question. Do you have an opinion or feel about, there is a large contingency of people in Chicago, the Chicago area. I think this is true nationally, right? That kind of idolize these mobsters, these outfit guys. I have a personal opinion that for all of the mafia, there's two worlds of existence: pre-Godfather and post-Godfather. Right? I mean, I think that you weren't thought of as this romanticized, like old school, that character that Don Corleone, man of respect, man of that kind of started with that film, and this is just my opinion, whatever. But there's a core group of people out there that idolize these the outfit mobsters, and so Chris asked me to ask you just if you have an opinion about that based on your work and all the research you did. And
I certainly do.
Care to share?
Several years ago, a guy reached out to me through Facebook. And somehow his message got I never got it. So 2 years later, I came across his message. Did you write this book, and can we talk about it? So I called him, and he said, there's this Facebook group that you would really be interested in. And I said, okay, I'll check it out. And he made it sound like it was a real close-knit group. So I still get notices from them, but I don't read them anymore. They're all people that you just described. And Richard, when I first joined the group, I identified myself and said that I'm writing a book, or I've written a book. I don't remember exactly what it was. The book was already published. Does anybody know anything about Richard Cain and his activities in Chicago? And the only response I got was guys who thought he was a rat. And I said, well, that's a really stupid conclusion because he was a lot of things, but he was never a rat. You can ask Bill Romer, you can't ask him, he's dead. But
No, but you could certainly read the FOI stuff where the Washington is admonishing Romer for like, you're just getting played here, man. Yeah, he's not giving you anything. And you stop paying him. Stop this, right? There's a lot of that. There's a whole school of thought just on Romer and his work. I've had another FBI agent who I won't name, but I think you and I've talked about him. He's like, look, you can't take anything that he wrote as information to use as an investigation. Forget about it.
I asked Romer one time if he had ever brought a case against anybody based on information he got from Richard, and he said no.
That was an interesting relationship, though, outside, without judgment. It's just interesting to think about. I mean, you talk about in the book how they'd gotten a knockdown, drag out fist fight, right? And however tough Dick was, Romer was a legit boxer, taught boxing, and was a pretty tough guy. But
yeah, he's a Golden Gloves champ in college. But his relationship with our father. My father was a hard guy to communicate with. And my relationship with him was no better than Richard's. But Richard was always trying to rebuild that relationship. Called him one day and said he'd just gotten back from Cuba, where he was sent to assassinate Fidel Castro. And a story like, why would a guy make up a story like that? And I know about the story because in the old days, two telephones in the house, one upstairs and one downstairs. My sister was listening on the other extension. He thought that was a patriotic thing to be doing, to assassinate Castro. And his dad might be proud of him, which wasn't the case.
No, brother, I mean, it's a fascinating time period in the country, but especially in Chicago, right? The early 50s into the 70s, it's so, I think nothing was legit. It doesn't seem like, I mean, it just nothing was. And not that there wasn't a lot of good people, a lot of good stuff, a lot of good stuff going on. Great city, but man, oh man, just city on the make is,
There's a guy, his name escapes me right now, but he was the guy who wore a wire in the Gray Alert case.
Is it Cooley?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cooley. I got to know him during this process. Cooley was a former cop who had gone to law school, and became de facto attorney to the mob, and I don't know, you live up there, so you probably follow some of the Chicago stuff. But when Harry Elman was tried for killing his brother-in-law, it was Cooley who paid off the judge that got him acquitted. And that was a big deal in Chicago because they were able to circumvent the double jeopardy laws and try him a second time. And he got 300 years.
Yeah. As far as I know, he's still the only guy in the United States to be tried, to be found not guilty, exonerated, and then tried again. The double jeopardy law is pretty, I mean, that's part of our existence, right? You get found not guilty, you're done.
Yeah.
But because they were able to show that the judge had been bought off and he was never really in jeopardy,
Right.
they were able to try him again, and he got convicted. And when I read this book, I got a note here. Thoughts about his connection to Barry Goldwater. And I got this highlighted. The high drama of his public and private adventures was defined by his work as a vice cop, international spy, and bodyguard to presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. He was our most famous conservative, Arizona senator, right? Barry Goldwater for years.
Barry Goldwater, in those days, there was no Secret Service protection for candidates. So Goldwater and Ogilvy had a relationship back through their U.S. attorney days. And so he contacted Ogilvy, who was sheriff at the time, and said, "You got anybody who can run a security group for me?" So yeah, I got a good guy, Dick Cain. So the Republican National Convention that year in 1962 was held in San Francisco. Richard went as a part of the governor's entourage, and he took 3 of his detectives with him. And one of the guys told me that they intended to disrupt the Democrats as best they could, so they were going to disconnect their phones. So they were crawling down in the sewer, looking for the phone lines, and all they could find was a 50,000 pair bundle of phone wires, which is literally that big. And he said the AT&T very thoughtfully left an electrical outlet right near where we were. So they plugged in a skill saw and just cut through all 50,000 wires. Actually, 100,000 wires, 50,000 pair. So I tried to, this was told to me by the guy who was running the saw, right? So and I'd gotten to know him well enough to believe it. So I tried to get some more evidence about that. Called the phone company in San Francisco and said, "You got any records of a major disruption on this date, 1962? No, couldn't find a thing." So, well, I guess you wouldn't want to talk about that.
No, right. That makes sense.
So, does that kind of touch on what you're after?
Yeah, wide influence.
Goldwater told him that he wanted him to, if he won the election, he wanted him to come and be in his Secret Service detail.
And Barry Goldwater, very likely, has no idea what he's dealing with there, right? He's an Arizona, conservative, Republican. Probably got surprised he trusts anybody from Chicago, but
Yeah, but he knew Ogilvy, so
yeah,
that's what made Dick trustworthy to him.
A lot of this we have covered. There were a couple things that I was curious about. At one point here early on, and we're talking about Right at the time he's murdered, you say on New Year's Eve '73, he planned to assassinate the leadership of the outfit, take control for himself, which is just unbelievably bold and how did you do you believe that was true? And I'm not asking you to name sources, but how did you kind of figure that?
Well, the guy who told me about that was this guy I mentioned earlier, who was not a member of the department, but a hired gun, so to speak. He said that Richard called him one day and asked if he was interested in some wet work. And he said, "What do you got in mind?" And he said, and the upshot was that Giancana spent New Year's Eve in Hawaii every year. This guy was living in Hawaii at the time, and he said, "I want you to kill Giancana." And he said, "Nope, I'm not going to do that." But he said we talked about it a good while, and Richard had recruited a group of Mexicans to do the Chicago hits because he couldn't hire any local talent because they'd have flipped on him right away, which is actually, I believe, how he was selected to be killed. His driver, Michael Gilardi, would have been the only guy in Chicago that he would have shared that with. And Gilardi was supposed to have driven him the day he was killed. Called, said he had a doctor's appointment. And 6 weeks after Dick was killed, Michael Gilardi bought a new house for cash. So,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah. I see that. What did Mabley have any opinion at all about Richard's murder? I mean, as far as who he thought, did he ever express what he thought happened?
He fingered Ailman and Joey Lombardo, and didn't know the third guy.
And was that based on information he got, you think, or just like us?
Ailman and Joey Lombardo, and didn't know the third guy.
And was that based on information he got, you think, or just like us, kind of made sense?
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, I mean, we covered most of this, so flipping through. Oh, I know the thing I wanted to get into. So, you and I had this discussion, and the whole JFK thing, right? He wasn't in Dallas on that day. He was signed into the grand jury, and then somebody was drinking with him at a bar, which you're going to remember, right? Because it's going to be in TV. People are going to be talking about the assassination. But the one thing that's kind of left out there that a little bit is there's been talk, and it might make some sense. I don't know enough about him, but that he had some or knew Jack Ruby in some way.
He would have known Jack Ruby, yeah. In fact, one of the first trips I made to Chicago to do serious research, I went to the Chicago Crime Commission, and they just let me browse through the files for a couple of days. And the first file that I pulled out that day had Richard's name on the tab, but in front were 2 newspaper clippings about Jack Ruby. And I asked, I think Fusel was the director at that time. I asked him about that. Any thoughts on what Jack Ruby's name is doing in this file? Because it didn't mention Richard in the articles. He said, "No, I can't say for sure, but they certainly knew one another. Because anybody who was heavy with Giancana or Accardo would have had to deal with Richard at some point.
I think I've talked to you about this. There's this linear thing for me with, I got reached out to by this detective in Evansville, Indiana. He was retired, or maybe actually I called him because I had a guy tell me about, I had no idea about this. Like, I was born in 1965. So like I'm looking at, in cold case, Richard's murder, or a girl named Becky Breedlove who was killed in 1974, case I still would like to see an answer for. I was 8 and 9 years old when those things happened, right? But I always had this historical kind of interest and then in cold case I got the opportunity to really look at it, which was cool, But there's a guy that I talked to a lot on Grand Avenue there. I wouldn't call him an informant, but he was a talkative guy. Told me about this millionaire Indiana old man that blew up in his car and didn't mean a thing to me. And I grew up, we grew up a few hours from Evansville, but I would have been, I think that was 78, 77. Can't remember exactly. His name was Ray Ryan. I don't remember exactly the year off the top of my head right now, but so maybe I reached out to the detective name was Bagby, Steve Bagby. And at the time he retired, he was the head of security for the Archdiocese in Evansville. I don't belabor this, but that was his life's mission, Ray Ryan's case. Ray Ryan's a very interesting character. You know a little bit about it, right? He was a legit oil man millionaire from Evansville, Indiana, who was like an international playboy, really. He was friends with William Holden and John Wayne and Sam Giancana. Him and William Holden owned a safari resort in Africa together. He was a big time gambler, $400,000, $500,000 card games. But this linear thing with Dick Cain always struck me in that Ray Ryan was hanging out a lot in the 50s in Vegas, player all over, and he got to be friends with Giancana. Thought they were really close, and then Marshall Cafano and another guy approach him, lean on him, try to extort money from him. And Ray Ryan, he's an old man, kind of cowboy, tough guy, millionaire. He's like, yeah, no. But what he does, he thinks him and Giancana are friends. There was several versions of this story, but this is the one I get. He goes to Giancana and says, hey, I got these 2 Chicago guys leaning on me for money. I'm not having it. Giancana says, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of it. So in very typical Chicago fashion, he comes back to Ryan and he says, hey, look, listen, I checked it. Those guys are just nuts. Why don't you just pay them? Be done with it, right? And Ryan's like, yeah, okay. So Ryan, again, he's not afraid. He goes to the FBI. The FBI sets up Cafano, and the other guy's name escapes me, but set them both up and they go to prison for like 10 years. I think they took 10 years. Cafano swears a blood oath he's going to kill Ray Ryan. He comes out, wants to kill him right away. But he's told by on high, whoever it was at the time, Paul Ricca or maybe Giancana, probably a Cardinal, somebody tells him, no, not doing it. He's a civilian, he's a millionaire, yeah, we're not getting ourselves involved in that. And presses it. And then what changes is, and this is the story I was told by a guy, is he has this relationship with Dick Cain. Cafano does. So there is this theory that sets him up on that day. In exchange for setting that up, killing him, he's given the wave to kill Ray Ryan. A couple years later, Ryan's blown up in his car. You know what I mean? It's just another one of those theories, but it is linear. You know what I mean? I don't know.
having lunch, and they got a call on the radio that they're going to murder Roses. And of course, nobody knew who it was at the time. But, somebody recognized I guess it was his clothing that gave it away. It was his face was a mess. I have a copy of one of the crime scene photos.
Oh, you do? I wondered about that. I used to have a set of those photos too, and I didn't want to put that on you because that's pretty gruesome. But I didn't know if you'd seen them or
It's
not.
just one picture that I have that's plenty gruesome.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome back to Detective Story. I'm Mike Hammond, my brother-in-law and partner, co-host Chris Kafcas. Thanks again for joining us. Chris, welcome. How you doing, brother?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. We are in the little 640 studio here today because we had to summarize and come to some conclusions with this Richard Cain story. Once again, how about Michael Cain, man? That dude is something else, right? So you've just seen the second part of the interview with Michael, and he's such a fun dude, articulate guy who really researched this, and I admire him. You know, that dude, he's investigating his own half brother who, as a kid, he worshipped, and you know, he doesn't. At some point, like, I didn't ask him this directly. I mean, I did ask him, like, was it hard? And he did say it was hard at times, but I didn't ask him, was there ever a time where he thought, well, to hell with this? I mean, I'm not going to write all this down. I mean, my half brother was a bad dude, and but he didn't do that.
No, I can't help but imagine that at a certain point he has to come with a more complete picture of his half brother, right?
Yeah.
And if you're just looking at the story on the surface, the immediate reaction is, this can't be true. This can't be. At every turn, this couldn't possibly be true.
Right.
This can't possibly be.
Right? It's just too crazy. Shout out to Mike again. Thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate your hospitality, your time with us. It means a lot. Book, which I recommend super highly, is The Tangled Web, The Life and Death of Richard Cain, Chicago Cop and Hitman, by Michael J. Cain, his half-brother and the author. It's extremely well researched. There'll be links to it in our bio here where you can go directly and buy the book. I mean, if you have any interest in true crime, mafia, Chicago crime, Chicago outfit, or even this crazy time period in American history, right? Like,
it's just, he kind of seeps into almost every part of the history of that era.
Really does.
From organized crime to politics, to the Kennedy assassination, to Castro, to Batista. I mean, he just keeps popping up.
I got reached out to by this old-time Cook County sheriff, and I didn't ask his permission to use his name. I don't think he would mind, but he's a pretty well-known guy. He was not happy with us.
No.
With what his belief that our inference that Richard Ogilvy, was corrupt in some way for hiring Richard Cain. I think we did mention, and I did mention to him, that we started out by saying, by all accounts,
he was a clean guy.
Ogilvy was a clean guy. And we did go a little bit on to how rare that is in Illinois, right? Because we send governors to prison like it was free. It's just ridiculous, the amount of corruption in 1950 and as we sit here in 2025. So to address that directly, he is correct. There is no evidence that Richard Ogilvy was corrupt in any way. So the question is, why does he hire Richard Cain, right? Well, he had an answer for that is plausible, and that is that, you know, Ogilvy had good experience with Cain when Cain helped him as an investigator prosecute Anti-Castro.
Right.
Anti-Castro, very arguably the most successful American mob boss in terms of, even though he took that one conviction, it was overturned on appeal. He didn't spend the night in jail. He never took another conviction, and he never spent a night in jail. And he was Al Capone's driver and died in like the late 80s, mid 80s. That whole time, he was either directly or tacitly running the Chicago mob, and he always had control of it. So that conviction was a big deal. even though it was overturned at appeal. And I think that there's strong belief, and probably accurately, that appeal wasn't accidental, that Richard may have influenced some of the evidence in a way that knew that it might be that it might be overturned. But Ogilvy, I mean, that was his experience with him. You know, he helped him as an investigator. He was the U.S. attorney at the time, a U.S. attorney. Got Ricardo convicted of this crime, which put Ogilvy on the map. He goes on to bigger and better things. How does he hire Richard? Well, in this very Chicago way, and this is very plausible, Ogilvy comes to the state's attorney's office kind of late in terms of his career, but he's a star. They want him, but there are some heavy hitters there at the time. Ben Adamowski, Big Jim Thompson, who later became our governor. Also, these guys were heavy hitters who were well-known prosecutors. Also, no indication that I'm aware of that those guys were corrupt. But it seems very possible that when Ogilvy wins the sheriff's race, which Cain certainly helped him do, quite possible that Ogilvy isn't even aware of the help they gave him, because it wasn't Cain. I mean, Cain did hope for a position, but, you know, they wanted Ogilvy in that spot. And it's unusual to this day for a Republican to get elected to any spot like that. So it's very possible that Thompson or Adamowski says, when he's looking for chief investigator and he wants to go after the mob, that they say to him, you know, this Cain, who you worked with before, he knows these guys. He might be your guy. And it could just be that simple. I mean, that sounds like, well, still all that, you know, sometimes that's the way things work, right? Like, right. I got a guy, you know, okay, I trust this guy, so I'm going to give this guy a shot. And look, to bolster, the final thing I'll say on this is to get Ogilvy underneath as far as we're concerned. I mean, if you really want to see the great columnist Mike Royko wrote an article that was basically titled "The Politician That Illinois Doesn't Deserve," and kind of extolling Ogilvy's incorruptibility. So there's that. But also, as soon as Richard Cain starts playing really hinky games, Ogilvy is shit of him. He gets rid of him. He fires him. He's gone. So I want to make that clear, that because this particular gentleman got in touch with me, worked with Ogilvy, had strong opinions about him in terms of, he thought he was a good man, never saw him do anything he believed to be corrupt. So, that to me is good enough. He knew the man. It's also
safe to say that Richard Cain could play the game. He's a hustler.
He was a hustler. He was a manipulator. And so some of the other questions that have come up, like, was Richard Cain a made man in the mob? I honestly don't know the answer to that. I think I did a bunch of research on it. It is possible because of his connection to Sam Giancana. Michael talked to people that believed he was. In the end, I don't know it matters that much, really, because he wasn't in a position of real authority in the outfit anyway. He was kind of just like their fixer, like Giancana's go-to fixer, who could get things done, could get answers for him, would tell all the tales on the police department who they're investigating.
They kind of grew up together, right? They had a relationship before he got onto the police department.
That's correct. I mean, that's another thing. Like, how does Cain suddenly become? Nobody knows him. Like, I heard that a lot in talking to my people. Like, nobody know where he came from, and that's part of why guys like Joey Lombardo are never going to trust him. Like, who is this guy? Who's this guy? Well, the truth with that is, real quickly, his grandfather was a guy named Olimpio Scalzetti, and that name comes up because Richard used that name several times throughout his career. In fact, the FBI, in one of the indictments of him when he was charged with crimes, said his real name was Richard Scalzetti. That's not true. His real name was Richard Cain. His father was John Cain, but his grandfather was Scalzetti, and Richard would use that name as a kind of alias and give him more street cred in that way, right? So his grandfather, Olimpio Scalzetti, immigrated from Italy in around 1920. He becomes part of a group called the White Hand, which is an Italian group that was kind of put together. I don't know if they really organized crime, but they were an organized Italian group that was organized to fight off the Black Hand, which was early Italian organized crime, and they leaned heavily on Italian businesses for juice, for protection money and those things. And later on, guys like Capone and the bosses in New York kind of put an end to the Black Hand because they didn't want their own people leaned on in that way. But early on, that was a thing, and that white hand was part of it. Olympio Scolzetti changes his name to Oli Scully, and because he's in legit business and thinks the Italian surname is hurting him, because of prejudice. Oli Scully gets involved with this white hand, and real quickly, like in 1928, the black hand kidnaps what turns out to be Oli's godson and the young kid for ransom. Takes several weeks. Police aren't getting anywhere with it. So Oli kind of conducts his own investigation in the neighborhood and figures out who it is going to take care of it themselves. But they kind of like, that's not what we do. And he gets convinced to go to the police. The police take his information and run with it and are able to find the guys responsible. The kid was released unharmed and returned home. But on the day the trial was supposed to start, which was December 17th, I think I said, of 1928, Oli was shot and killed in a bar before he could testify. So Richard, his mother was Oli's daughter. Richard wasn't born until 31, so he would have never known Oli, but that was his kind of lineage. So his mother was a Scalzetti, his true mother, Lydia. And Lydia met John Cain on trips back and forth to Michigan that she would take with her sister. John Cain moved here to Chicago for a while to work as like a laborer. Depression hits. They get married, Lydia and John, Richard's parents, but they moved to Michigan to work on the Cain family farm. Just doesn't really work out. Lydia misses Chicago. She comes home. They both come home, actually. John comes back. He has trouble finding work. They get divorced. And in 1931, before they get divorced, they have Richard. He's born. She basically moves back. They're living near Taylor Street. But when her and John divorce, she basically moves back to Taylor Street where her family and things are. And so Richard spends his early life
on Taylor Street
and back and forth between Taylor Street and Michigan. But one thing's for certain, the mother was clear. His mother, who Michael interviewed, now they weren't related, different mothers, right? Same father, but Michael interviews Richard's real mother, and she says that she remembers Sam Giancana. He was around. He's a little older. He kind of took Richard under his wing. She self-admitted was not a great parent, didn't really want kids, didn't understand how to deal with it, and let kind of Richard run wild on the street. So that's the connection. And that also would explain why a lot of these guys that grow up on Taylor Street or Grand Avenue really might not have known Richard. So then he goes into the Army, gets married in the Army, gets stationed in the Virgin Islands, kind of starts to begin to learn Spanish there, gets discharged honorably in 1950. He moves to Miami. Significant, right?
Right.
Because he goes to work for a private eye by the name of Wayne's, who was a pretty well-known private eye down there. And that guy, Wayne's, basically takes Richard under his wing, teaches him how to do wiretaps, how to do like high level surveillance. Because it turns out, our guy Bwaynes was childhood friend. He was a Cuban, American, moved out of Cuba to Miami, but he was childhood friends with Fulgencio Bautista, the later president and then ousted dictator of Cuba, and that friendship remained. And he would often send Richard in the early 50s there to Cuba.
I mean, he's like 2 steps removed from all of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he is genuinely like, it's incredible the way this shook out. It really, but he's in Cuba doing wiretaps for Bautista and surveillance on other politicians because Bautista becomes a dictator very, very and later with good cause, because Castro puts together a revolutionary front that overtakes him. But he was always suspicious that people were out to oust him and that. So Richard spends a lot of time there in Cuba and becomes very fluent in Spanish. And that leads us down this whole other road, right? I mean,
So there's the organized crime road, and with connections into Cuban politics, anti-Castro politics. Right. And then at some point, he does know Jack Ruby. Right. Well, the progression of this then in 1956, he moves back to Chicago. He gets on the Chicago police. So question 2, was he always a corrupt Chicago policeman? Yeah, almost certainly, because from the jump.
He doesn't reveal the Scalzetti name or anything at all during the hiring process. He's too small. His eyesight isn't good enough, but he overcomes that to get on the police department. And then it's documented within a year of being on the police department, he is back in touch with his old pal, Sam Giancana, right?
If you ever lost touch with him.
Yeah, very unlikely. But maybe, he's in the Army, he's doing other stuff.
Yeah.
He gets back to Chicago, and now Giancana is somebody.
Yeah.
So,
hey, Sam, guess what?
Yeah, Richard reaches out and...
You'd never believe what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, right. Easy peasy, right? Like, now I got a few
and at that point, he's got a whole new skill set that he learned down in Miami, right?
Yeah.
He's a expert wiretapper, right?
Yeah.
And then it just rolls from there.
Right. And then, there's so much to unravel here. We're trying to keep this fairly short to wrap this up and make it clean, but it's very difficult. But we're just trying to answer the questions.
Let me ask a question. Is there solid evidence, at least circumstantial evidence, that Richard Cain was involved in a plot to assassinate Castro?
Yeah, I think it's pretty solid. Right. So, if you kind of plot it out in your head, like, all right, what's true about Cain or not, right? Like, was he a lifelong connection to the Chicago outfit? Yeah, I think we established that. He grew up with, did he have connections to Bautista and Cuba and speak Spanish and these things? Well, I think that we document now. Well, Michael, actually in the book, I don't want to take credit for that. He documents that starts early,
right,
before he's on the police department. And working for this Blaine's in Miami, he makes strong connections.
It's to the point where the CIA is documenting interactions he's having with anti-Castro organizations.
Well, that comes later.
Right.
Yeah.
That's in the 60s.
That comes later. Right.
But I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, so what he does is keeps parlaying these skill sets and connections that he has into different positions for him. Right? Yeah. I mean, one of the crazy things to me too, not particularly unusual, I think, for the time period, but he gets on the Chicago Police Department. Right. He's connected to Giancana. He's a corrupt copper from the start. He's an outfit guy. He is supplementing his income, ripping off prostitutes, drug dealers. There's all kinds of early allegations that are unfounded. At the same time, and maybe to help bolster this, he develops relationships with guys like Jack Mabley, one of the most well-known columnist newspaper writers in the city at the time. And so he's feeding information, and there's these newspaper articles as a young policeman. Cain is hero in this, Cain is hero in that, which, in some ways is counterintuitive. Like, why are you going to put your name out there? Keep it low key. On the other hand, though, it's really good PR.
Right.
Right. Like, and then, the next question is, of all the other shit, was Richard Cain a murderer, a killer, assassin? Right. Like, how clear is that? There's a lot of I think it's pretty clear now, especially with the further research I was able to do with Michael's amazing research. There's no doubt that he was a killer. Yeah. I mean, look, him and his partner, Jerry Shallow, who met when they went to Vice, which is an incredible place to send two corrupt coppers, but that's Chicago in 1950, I suppose. But they shoot and kill in what is deemed a heroic, justifiable shooting a guy named Harry Fiegel. Harry Fiegel was not anybody's idea of a good man. He was a pimp, a thief, a conman, and he particularly pimped and preyed on very young gay men and young boys who were not yet men and turning them out onto the street. He was just like the definition of everything society was frightened of and scared of. And in a very unusual move, even by legit standards, Harry Fiegel is approached by Shallow and Cain and decides to shoot it out with him. They shoot and kill him, get all these awards and that. Fiegel's attorney, knowing he ain't a great guy and knowing this is an uphill battle, still goes to the inquest and says that look, the evidence doesn't match this, and put together a pretty significant case that it didn't even happen where they claimed it happened. Michael, and now again, we're talking about his half-brother, who, when he was young, had a lot of affection for, and in his book, I think, comes to that conclusion that he doesn't believe it happened the way Cain and Shallow claimed it happened, that it was a straight-out assassination or murder. Fiegel shot directly in the top of the head, which in itself can be explainable in some ways. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in gun battles, but seems super hinky.
Yeah.
And so, okay, but let's say you're going to go along with that official version of that and say, well, he's a bad guy, he's justifiable. That doesn't make him a killer. Well, jumping ahead a little bit, there's a couple things that are in question. Like Michael alludes to the fact that there were people who believe that Richard may have assassinated or murdered Sam DiStefano, Mad Sam, they call him, infamous Chicago mobster, so crazy and so violent, allegedly, mostly kind of bolstered by Bill Romer's books, that even the Chicago outfit didn't really want to deal with him, except he made them a lot of money because he was a fearsome juice collector. He'd torture and murder people who didn't pay, whatever. Sam DiStefano was shot and killed in his garage in the very early 70s. Somebody will know that exactly and correct me. But that murder, I do not believe he did. That's pretty well documented now, although it's still open and it's not a closed homicide. So technically, DiStefano's murder could have been anybody. But I think it's pretty well accepted in the circles now that Sam DiStefano's own brother and Tony Spilotro, who was up and coming before he went to Vegas at that time, real outfit muscle guy, killer, killed him. That makes a lot more sense to me. There's a lot more kind of substantiation for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, DiStefano, I don't think is going to be standing in his garage and let some guy he doesn't quite know or knows little, maybe even Richard Cain, kind of walk up on him like that.
Yeah.
It makes a lot more sense that his own brother. And look, at the time DiStefano was
There's
killed,
another hit though, right?
there is there's one that they definitely did, and that is a poor woman in Indianapolis, Indiana, in 1972 by the name of Shirley Movigliano, Movigliano. So some of my old friends from Clinton, Indiana, Italian friends, yell at me and tell me how to pronounce that properly. But Shirley had the misfortune of living in Chicago for a while. She ends up dating an outfit guy. This guy is not a big player or anything. He's kind of I think he was a made guy, but he's nobody of significant note. And here's a good example of why, because either in a fit of rage or a drunken passion, he admits to poor Shirley that he killed this dude. So then they break up and she moves back to Indianapolis, and our outfit guy is overcome with guilt that she's going to tell somebody. And it's a big sin to tell, bedside stories about murder. And he knows if she's alive and she tells somebody and gets back here, I'm going to get clipped myself. So he tries to get several people to, I'm not mentioning his name, it'd be easy to find it. It's just, he's a freaking loser. But this is how bad a loser he is. Outfit guy, maybe made guy. He hires 2 or 3 guys to go down there and kill her. And the first 2 or 3 just take his money and blow him off. You know what I mean? So he's not anybody that is feared, or he's just not very bright. But he does finally get a hold of Richard Cain and Jerry Shallow, and they agree to do it. And this is all documented. I actually reached out to the Indianapolis Police Department to see if this murder was still open, and it is not. So what happens is, after Richard is killed in 1973, a few years later, Jerry Shallow flips and starts cooperating with the feds. And among the things that he admits to, probably in a proffer, which is where you kind of have to admit if you're going to agree to work with the FBI and get help on cases, you got to do what's called a proffer and basically admit to every crime you ever committed. And you make the deal on the totality of that. And there's famous cases of that, right? One of the most famous is, what's the little guy that was Gotti's right-hand man that killed 18 people? Sammy the Bull Gravano, right? Gravano, why does he admit to 18 murders? Because he's making a deal. He's got to do this proffer. He's got to admit to everything. And if you get caught, the G gets caught in a lie, whatever deal, he catches you in a lie, whatever deal that's been made is out the door. So it behooves you to just admit everything you ever did. And in Sammy the Bull's case, says he did 18 murders. In Jerry Shallow's case, he admits to a bunch of stuff, including Shirley Movigliano's murder. And what he says is they take the money from the guy. He gets a basic story. They go down. Doesn't take them long to kind of find her. They follow her. She goes to this is, I think, 1972. She goes to like a Kmart. Jerry's driving. Richard gets out with a 38 revolver, I think he said, or 32 revolver. walks up, first shot through the window, hits her in the forehead, and she's clearly dead. So he gets back in the car and he drive off. Well, not only is that credible because it's part of this federal proffer, the story makes sense. Richard's not going to drive to Indianapolis. His eyesight's really going by that time. It's good enough to walk up and shoot somebody point blank. So they definitely murder this kid. Well, they actually charged Jerry Shiloh with a murder, and he got time for it. And it seems without question, Richard was dead by that time, but had they had the information Richard still been alive, Richard would have been charged and likely convicted of that murder. So there is little doubt that they killed this poor.
So he's a murderer. He's a hitman for sure.
I asked Michael if are you aware, did he have any connection to Jack Ruby? Did he know Jack Ruby? And Michael said he definitely knew Jack Ruby. Like, oh, okay, well, how? Well, Jack Mabley told him that, who's the writer. There was a couple different people that told him that they had either seen him together or he said he knew him. So they had a relationship of some sort. To what degree, don't know. But it seems quite clear that Richard Cain and Jack Ruby knew each other, even in passing, they knew each other, right? So that's an issue for me because realistically, I think somebody got to Jack Ruby and said, look, now, I also asked a good friend of mine, the best policeman I ever worked with or for. He's got an amazing, sharp mind and became a detective in like 1971. I asked him, I said, hey, did you ever know anybody that knew Jack Ruby when he was in Chicago? He goes, yeah, my dad did. My dad knew him, had dealings with him. And his father was a really well-known captain, beloved captain on Chicago Police Department, my buddy. He tells me Ruby was part of this like Devon and Western, north part of Chicago, very Jewish. Back in the days, it's still heavily Jewish there, west of there, right?
Yep, a little west of there, yeah.
Devon, west of there. And Ruby was part of that crew, and his dad had several kind of dealings with him. And there's nothing there in terms of like what happened in Dallas, but he did make the point that, Ruby was dying of, he said, stomach cancer at the time. And I said, I didn't know that. I knew he died later, but I didn't know that he was dying at the time. He goes, yeah, he was. A lot of people don't know that. So for me, then, it's not too far of a ledge to go out on and say that somebody from the outfit gets to Ruby and says, look, you got these debts, you got all this shit going on, you do this for us, we'll take care of everything you got, right? And again, can you just exclude Richard Cain from that? Right? Because he's the fixer. He's the freaking do-it-all.
Yeah,
right?
He's the guy that introduces people. Like, he just kind of seems to know someone involved in every bit of the story, And
Sam Giancana is the man then. The man. He is like the head of the Chicago mob. And if you're, if you're Giancana and you want this handled, it's a short list.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and he's at the top of it.
Okay, so again, no, that's wild ass extrapolation, right? But
I'm sitting at home and I get a text message from Mike, and it's a little clip of a black and white movie. And the text just says, who is this guy? And I look at the clip, and it's the movie that he works his way into down in Mexico. And there he is in a movie doing a polygraph test in a black and white, like, true crime movie in Mexico.
Yeah, and you're like, you got to be shitting me.
It can't fucking be.
Right, but I'll tell you something else that we found out. Like, we mentioned this film, this Mexican film, because Michael said to me, I said, "Did you ever, are there any interviews of Richard that you ever found?" He goes, "No, I didn't, because he's in the media a lot. Maybe he was interviewed, but he said, I never found any." He goes, "But, there is a film, a Mexican film that he's in. I saw pieces of it." He goes, "I'll find it, the name for you." He does a polygraph examination, and he said the quality of the video is not good, but it's him. So it took a little work, and Michael definitely facilitated this for me, but I found that film, La Mente y El Crimen, which is in English is The Mind and Crime, the Crime. It was released in 1964 by, if you're at all, and I didn't know who he was, frankly, going into this. And we're both film guys, but I don't know if you'd heard of him. But it was directed by a guy named Alejandro Galindo. Alejandro Galindo was a very well-known, well thought-of Mexican film director.
So, there's a big piece of the puzzle here, right?
Yeah. So
Cain is in Mexico City for an extended period of time.
Well, according to the FBI reports, FOI reports, Richard Cain is ousted deported basically from Mexico in 1961, right? And that's that. He's back here by 62. He's working with sheriff's department. He's back here allegedly. The problem for me is, and I reached out to some real film historians, but this is a struggle. And if somebody comes up with this answer, it'd be fantastic to know. The best I can figure this. Well, first of all, let me tell the story. I watched, and sure enough, like at 1 hour and 40 minutes or whatever, it is bad quality, but it's a highly dramatized documentary about a murder. Kind of like we said, if you remember the Jack Webb Dragnet, very kind of heavy on police investigation and dramatic. But this is kind of a docudrama. Right. So part of it is coppers actually working, and part of it is actors doing things. Right. But sure enough,
there's Richard Cain.
Yeah. They bring in this guy for a polygraph, and guy walks in, hooks him up, can't see him very well, but he sits across from him, and the light shines on him, and it is Richard Cain.
So here it is, Alejandro Galindo's original movie poster for La Mente y el Crimen. And here is the IMDb's credits, and there it is, Richard Cain. Now watch this.
Contra su voluntad. Y esta es una muy buena razón, calma, para observar si la gráfica sufre alguna alteración. Nada hasta el momento. Ahora, muy importante. ¿Usted quería a Magdalena? Sí. ¿Usted conoce el uso y aplicación de todos y cada uno de los instrumentos quirúrgicos que vende? Sí. ¿Alguna vez discutió usted con Magdalena?
And, I sent you that, and I'm like, tell me who this is.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the? So that is in itself crazy, right? And he's you can tell he's speaking Spanish. It's him. There's no question. It's him. The best I can figure, that production in that film took place in 1963. So I'm trying to verify that. So if somebody can help me with that, somebody's film historian, somebody especially knows Mexican film.
And that's important because?
It is important because
there was someone else in Mexico City.
There was someone else in Mexico City in several months of 1963, and that someone else was Lee Harvey Oswald. September 27th through October 2nd, 1963. So in the months leading up to the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald is documented in Mexico City. He shows up at the CIA office there and wanting something or another. They turn him away, but they document he was there. He shows up at the Russian embassy. The Russian embassy claims, as they're going to claim, but whatever, that he wants something from them, but they basically blow him off. But they also document that he's there. That's how we know for sure that he's in Mexico City. Mexico City's a big ass place. It's big now. It was big then. Having Richard Cain and Lee Harvey Oswald in the same city at the same time, if that's true, is a troubling piece of, doesn't mean anything really, right? It's not a piece of evidence. It is just
interesting.
Just interesting. Like, it doesn't allow me to close that door completely, right?
Could be, could not be. The thing that is fascinating is you can't, because of his involvement in all these other things where I thought there's no possible way, and these loose connections, these ties here, he's kind of, got his fingers here and his fingers there. It's not so easy to just discount.
No, it's not. Now,
could it be? It could be. Could it not be? It could not be.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I'll make two kind of, just based on my experience, kind of comments based on this here. I mean, one, he's got an alibi, great one. He's in Chicago on the date of Kennedy's murder. But, my experience tells me if you're part of a conspiracy to have someone killed, especially somebody like the President of the United States, big time, you're going to want to be somewhere else and show that you're somewhere else, right? Document that you're somewhere else. I was here. I can prove it, right? And the whole, there is a line of thought out there that Richard Cain and Chuck Nicoletti, another infamous Chicago mob hitman, bad man, were the two guys on the grassy knoll. I got a real problem with that, and so does Michael. First of all, Richard wasn't there. We know that. Two, his eyesight was never good and was getting dramatically worse as he got older. And that's not the guy you're going to send.
Right.
To take those shots if you want it done. And even with Nicoletti, like if the Chicago mob turns out that they are involved in the Canadian, are you going to use two guys that are so easily associated with you that are like known associations?
No, but would you send one of them down to Mexico City to meet with the guy that is going to do it?
Yeah, that's much more likely, right? So I think that that's why, it's difficult for me to close that door. And I'm going to ask Chris to read something to you guys in a second that even sends it down a little bit more of a rabbit hole. But I will say this, though, here's my experience. CIA is not a stupid organization. They don't do, they've done some things that, are egregious, and some things that, most Americans would say they shouldn't have done. And probably now they say in retrospect they shouldn't have done. But look, if you're going to be behind something like that, and you're going to employ like someone like the Chicago outfit to pull it off from you, you're going to remove yourself. I don't believe, I think they could release everything that was ever done on every paper that ever was released, like they said they were going to, and like they said they're going to about Epstein. But I'd be very surprised if that's not disappointing for people. The CIA is brilliant at using cutout people, and cutout people, as I define it, is someone who has a role in a crime or conspiracy or anything else, but they only know their piece of it. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have the full picture, the full knowledge. So could Richard Cain have been that cutoff guy? Go meet with this guy and tell him this and this to be at this time and this time. And that may all be that Richard Cain knew. So I think that will be what comes out of all the paperwork. I don't think there's going to be a linear line that tells us Shazam, here it is, proof that this was a big conspiracy. I don't think it'll ever be that simple, even if it does get released. But having said all that, Michael shared with me a bunch of the freedom. He got so much Freedom of Information Act stuff back because he'd requested it from, we talked about this before, but from Chicago Police Department, Cook County Sheriff, Cook County State's Attorney, FBI, CIA, Immigration, Federal Bureau of Prisons, everything that Michael had contact with in the early 90s. And he got back a bunch of redacted shit that really didn't tell him a lot of anything. But unbeknownst to him, as it turns out, in the early 2000s or late 90s, a federal judge said basically, you guys got to stop this shit. Unless you can show that someone, active investigation is at risk, or a cooperating person's life is at risk or something, you cannot just redact everything. You have to release these documents. And so then the press and everybody starts getting much more unredacted files from everybody that show a lot more information, right? So Michael then gets boxes and boxes and boxes in 2000. He's not expecting them, but now they are a lot more complete in their information, right? So he has so much he couldn't have gone through it one lifetime, and he did the best he could with this book, but it's going on and on. But he gave me a bunch of it because it's like, take this and look at it, whatever. Some of it with purpose, some of it I think was wild. But in doing that, I find this report, and I'll let you, Chris, you give us your thoughts after you read it. It's a page, and you can see I've got highlighted one paragraph there, right? Would you read that without the date?
Cain reported to the Chicago field office information on persons claiming to be representatives of the DRE, Directorio Revolucionario Estudiantil, who purchased arms for the DRE. Cain planned another meeting with the alleged DRE representatives, via DCD Washington and DCD Chicago, got word to Cain to get out of the picture as soon as possible and to make no commitments.
Tell us the date now on that.
12 September 1963.
12 September 1963, 6 weeks before Kennedy's assassination. The DRD there is the CIA, right? So what you have there is, if not the station chief, some boss here with the CIA in Chicago who's made contact with Cain, and Cain tells them this. He reports then to DRD CIA Washington what he gets, and basically he reports, I told him, get your head down, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, weeks before Kennedy's assassination. What do you tell me your thoughts on that?
I mean, there it is again. I mean, there's just these loose connections. Could it mean something? Yeah, absolutely it could. I mean, at the very least, he's on the fringe connected with the people that are connected with this, right?
Yeah. I honestly was like, talking myself out of all this, like, I don't want to go down that road. It's just, the freaking guy was into so much shit. It's so complicated. And then I read this. I called Chris and I read it to him, and he's same reaction, like, gotta be shitting me.
Yeah, he's just right there. Which in the sum total of this picture Is he a bad man? He's definitely a bad man. Corrupt policeman, hitman, career criminal. But at the same time, this guy's life is just fast. He just keeps popping up here. He keeps popping up there. Is he the guy that does these things? No, but he's a part of history. He's on the fringe of all this. Maybe the facilitator, maybe not, but I mean, he's there, right? At the very least, he's acquainted with on a more than a loosely acquainted with people that are involved in some of the most monumental occurrences of the 1960s, 1970s.
Yeah, right. I mean, again, we started this all out in the first episode by like saying, you know, he was a man who existed and could only have existed in the way he did in the time period he did, in a place he did, you know, American history in that time period, and makes him fascinating. I mean, well, let's get to wrapping this up. I mean, first, let's talk about his murder. I don't really actually think that's that big a mystery. I mean, I think Michael comes to the conclusion through his own investigation. It was very likely Joey Lombardo, Harry Aleman, and Butch Petrocelli. I don't have any reason to dispute that. In fact, I spoke with a guy. I didn't ask to use his name. I don't think he would mind, but I won't do it until I do. But I spoke with a guy who's a longtime outfit guy or a connected guy. It's not fair to call him an outfit guy. And he also a longtime cooperator with the feds. And he basically tells me that he overhears Marshal Cafano and Lombardo talking about it, and Lombardo admitting to or saying that he pulled the trigger. Richard was killed, blast from a double barrel shotgun. They put it under his chin, fired both barrels. Crime scenes are pretty stark. He was dead literally before he hit the floor. He was definitely, I think, without question, set up by Marshal Cafano. I won't go into all that. I think there are a lot of reasons that go into that, including the later assassination, the Ray Ryan, the Evansville oil man who was blown up in his car. I think there's a connection, kind of a linear connection to that, but I won't go down that road right now. We've taken up a lot of time. But I think it's fair to say that starts with Cafano and ends with listen, Harry Aleman and Butch Petrocelli were doing the hits.
Right.
I mean, they were the guys that were put in charge of bringing in all the bookies and stuff under the fold. And you ever seen the movie Thief? It's kind of based on that whole timeline. And Aleman did go to prison for a long time. Petrocelli was murdered out in the West Side himself for holding back money, probably. It's a little more complicated than that. But nothing at that time happened in that neighborhood without Joey Lombardo's okay. Up until the day Joey goes off to prison, that was true. I think that's a fair conclusion on that. I honestly believe if you wanted to, given the statement with the guy discussed and the totality of the kind of circumstantial thing, I think you could probably clear that murder if you wanted to. I don't know there's big motivation to do that, but that would have to be done by the police department, but I think there might be enough there. They did include Richard's murder in the original family secrets indictment, and then they pulled it. But I think that the reason they pulled that is they had 17 other cases. When they originally did the indictment, they were hoping either Joey Lombardo would flip on himself or somebody would flip on him with the Cain murder. They also took all the evidence out of our herbs and had that worked up for DNA. So that must have gone nowhere, which makes sense in a murder like that, you know, in and out. I don't know how much any of you guys know about Joe Lombardo. I talked to him one time. Joe Lombardo was never going to be the guy shit on himself. And you'd see him riding his bicycle as he's older around the neighborhood. And so I think they just pulled that murder because they had strong cases with the other ones, and they had the Logan murder, not Logan. What was his name? The poor guy that Lombardo did kill, Seifert. Seifert murder was strong, and they did get him convicted on that. Killed in front of his wife and children. But so I think for me that door's closed on his murder. Yeah. Right. So let's just wrap up. Final thoughts here. Trying to come to grips with the enigma of Richard Cain. What was he? Who was he? What was he? Can you put a a final stamp on this is who he was, or is it really just not possible?
The elusive Richard Cain.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, you can't. It's just which makes him that much more fascinating. You know, is he the guy that is he involved in this, and this? Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't.
You know, he had plans. I didn't mention this, but now we're wrapping this up. New Year's Eve, 1973, going into 74, he had plans to kill the head of the Chicago mob and take it over himself.
Yeah.
I thought that's absolute bullshit.
No,
like,
but it's
who could think of such a thing? And Giancana's out of favor by this time, and they had kind of had a little falling out. But Giancana's, it's really at that time. I think Paul Rico. No, I don't know if Paul Rico was still alive at that time, but definitely Tony Cardo, Joe Lombardo. Yeah. I mean, there's some big, mean, dangerous fucking guys out there you're going to have to take off. And I thought that Michael makes that point in his book, and no disrespect to Michael. I mean, you know. He heard it, but you know what? Allegedly, he brought up Mexican killers. Like he had people up here. Who the hell knows, man? I mean, this guy was not afraid of making grand plans. Yeah. He was not going to pull it off. I mean, that's a freaking story, but he's not going to pull that off. These guys get them all in one place, except when they have dinner, and that's, I suppose, what you're hoping to try and set up, maybe. But whatever. I mean, he was a dead man. Why was he killed? Well, pick a reason. Yeah, maybe that, but I think that Bardo never liked him for a variety of reasons. We left out the FBI informant thing. Got to address that. Was he an FBI informant? He was, except that he never prosecuted a single case based on his evidence. No disrespect to my FBI buddies, but he was playing Bill Romer. Yeah. And Romer wrote all his books, and Bill Romer, I think, was a very legit, hardworking guy. He was a tough guy, good boxer. His books, I had another FBI agent I worked with, who's older, who I didn't work with him. I called him for some advice on some outfit stuff I had. And this guy's a legend. He knew these guys. And he just basically told me he didn't have any personal beef with Romer, but he said, kid, never use anything in his books as part of an investigation. Right? So he's basically telling me, like, he's selling books, right? Which is okay. But what is true through these FOI requests is the FBI headquarters in Washington continually told Romer, stop giving this guy money, talking about Richard Cain. He has not produced a single lead.
He's a hustler.
And they had a real relationship, no doubt. But I think that Cain was playing that, giving him just enough where it's not going anywhere. And what are you going to tell me back? And right. I don't know Romer. I'm not calling him a stupid man. Maybe never give anything away. I mean, it's almost endless. Yeah. This freaking guy. So can you put him in it? I think it's really hard. I think that he is somewhere between like a master manipulator con man that Ricky Jay would have been proud of. And he's somewhere between that and a guy who almost got there with everything he did in his life.
But never quite.
Never quite. Just like almost like the sad sack guy. Like just this close. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and even you factor in like this grand plan, if it actually existed, to take over the Chicago mob, like this fucking guy, man, like what in the world? So I think if you painted me into a corner, I would say that in the end, he was a master manipulator, great communicator, good con man who knew how to make really good connections, but never quite got that big score.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just fell short. And then painted himself into a corner and allowed himself to get put in the spot in Rose's sandwich shop that a guy with his kind of wherewithal should have never allowed to happen. And that's where it ended.
Yeah. Just fascinating.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's it. Just the elusive enigma of Richard Cain.
Right. The fascinating. I mean, there's nobody quite like him. There is these.
You couldn't write this character. I've said it over and over again. You couldn't make this character up for a movie. You just couldn't, because no one would believe the character could exist.
No, as a reference point, who's the guy, Barry, the pilot that Tom Cruise played? Barry, somebody will tell me, they made a movie about him. He starts flying dope, and he gets into this crazy world where he knows all these dope dealers. He starts working for the DA, and he knows Pablo Escobar. He knows everybody. He knows, and that guy's life is crazy. Yeah. But that's like one linear thing. Like he gets hooked into the dope trade. He gets into some other things with, arms dealing and that, but really it's part of one kind of like lane. It's still crazy, but Richard Cain had 6 of those lanes.
Yeah.
Right? Just nuts.
Yeah.
So you got questions, we'll answer them. I don't want this to be 4 hours, but it's just hard to try and get all of what this
Richard
dude
Cain.
was into in one.
Richard Cain.
In one.
Read the book.
Why we made
Read the book and reach out to us and tell us what you think.
Yeah, the book again, The Tangled Web, The Life and Death of Richard Cain, Chicago cop and hitman, to say the least.
Until next time.
Yeah, so thank you again to Michael Cain. Man, great time with him. Good man. Really enjoyed the time. Enjoyed a great scar. Please check out our station page. Got some super cool stuff coming there where you're going to be able to communicate directly with us. We're working that up. That'll be up. It is up now. You can check it out. The link will be in there. And but you'll have direct lines with us. We're going to do I think kind of a weekly news update where we'll talk about cases, stuff we worked on, maybe get into some more kind of public news affairs type things. And so stay with us. We really appreciate it. Chris.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Adios. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
Be safe.